You ever hear fabric scream like a living thing, tearing so loud, a whole cabin forgets how to breathe? I did. And in the split second after that sound, I felt a stranger's eyes on my back from 3 rows away. I didn't know the stranger was my father. My name is Jania. On my 16th birthday, I didn't ask for a party. No balloons, no shopping spree. I asked for a uniform, a name pin, a jump seat. I asked to work one day as a flight attendant. My mom, Amara, wore that uniform back when the job came with smiles on the tray and slurs in the aisle. She handled monsters with manners dignity, like a blade wrapped in silk. I wanted to walk in her shoes, even if it blistered. You think that's foolish or brave? Be honest. My dad is Charles Montgomery, CEO of Montgomery Airlines. When I told him, he laughed, he choked on his coffee. Then he stared like I'd just asked to solo a 787. He offered a beach, a car, anything but this. I told him Mom didn't face that ugliness, so I could live behind tinted glass. Let me earn the day. He said yes, but with rules he carved into the counter with his voice. No special treatment. No one knows who you are. You handle everything yourself. I nodded so fast he narrowed his eyes like he'd been out-negotiated by a teenager. What I didn't know, he bought a ticket on my flight, baseball cap, sunglasses, quiet. He would be there without being there. Yeah, that happened. Training was a rhythm my body recognized. Demos, door arming service, flow the dance of carts in tight aisles. I studied manifests like love letters. Patricia, 20 years on the line, watched me fold a napkin square and said, "You remind me of someone." There was an attendant named Amara who could turn venom into vapor with a look. I pretended to fix my scarf so she wouldn't see what her words did to me. You ever swallow a storm just to keep smiling? You know what I mean? Morning of flight, 4:47, JFK to Miami. I stood in front of the mirror and saw my mother's posture hiding under my bones, her calm in the set of my jaw. "Grace under pressure is your greatest weapon," I whispered, checking the seams, the name pin that read Johnson instead of Montgomery. I signed in and I breathed. I walked that jet bridge into the kind of day that rearranges a life. Boarding was smooth in economy. Pregnant passenger row, 22 bag, too heavy breath, too short. I knelt, tucked a pillow behind her back, eased the belt, swapped her aisle seat with a willing neighbor. "Girl, you okay?" I said, voice soft. Not the crisp one we use at doors. She smiled and called me sweetheart, and the knot between her eyebrows loosened. That's real service. Not coffee, not cookies. Noticing the person who's hurting when everyone else stares at their screen. Then I crossed the curtain. Seat 2A looked at me like oxygen was hers by title. Victoria Piton. Designer heels that declared victory with every click, a perfume that showed up before she did a mouth that knew how to smile without meaning it. She let her gaze travel from my bun to my shoes, like I'd tracked mud onto marble. "Since when do they let teenagers into first class?" she said, hitting the word "they" like a bell. Patricia slid closer. "Ms. Johnson is fully trained to serve all sections," she said, steady as a handrail. My fake last name floated between us like a paper shield. I rolled the cart. "Good morning, ma'am. Orange juice or champagne?" She ignored the offer to answer the presence. "You people always want to be where you don't belong," she said. "And if you were in that cabin, tell me, would you speak up right there or wait for the room to get colder? Do you think that's fair?" I kept my voice smooth. "My job is to make this flight exceptional for you, ma'am. Orange juice or champagne?" She took the champagne. The storm stayed. For 20 minutes, the air inside that cabin felt like glass. Crisp, bright, one wrong move from shards. I bounced back to economy to check on Sarah, tucked a second pillow at her lower back, told her she was braver than she felt for flying. At 7 months, slid back through the curtain into a weather system that didn't want me in it. Code switching isn't being fake. It's learning how to keep your candle lit in a wind tunnel. You know what I mean. Here's where the mask cracked. I reached across 3A with a tray exactly how they teach you. Victoria's wrist slipped and a tidal wave of red wine leapt out like it had rehearsal. It hit me warm and sticky and loud. "Oh dear," she sang, "how clumsy of me. But honestly, that uniform never really suited you." The stain bloomed across my jacket like a wound. In 2C, Robert Harrison, a black executive who moves through rooms like he's paid for every inch twice, stood up. "That was no accident," he said, voice calm, final. The white guy in 3B, fast thumbs and faster reflexes, raised his phone. My throat closed, my hands did that silent tremble I inhaled like it was a ladder. "Ma'am," I said, "it's standard protocol for service to reach this way." "I'll get a fresh jacket." I excused myself and walked to the lav with legs that felt like borrowed furniture. Behind the thin door, I met the version of me that cries with her shoulders. Mirror, paper towels, the sharp smell of cheap soap and red wine. I thought of Mom cutting fruit after a long day, saying she was fine while the knife said she wasn't. "Baby, they will see your skin before your soul. You will feel small in rooms you earned your way into, but you are unbreakable." Unbreakable doesn't mean you never bend. It means you remember how to stand. Grace under pressure. Grace under pressure. Until the words weren't words. They were breath. I buttoned a spare jacket that didn't fit quite right and opened the door. Pattern interrupt. I should have been scared to go back, but I wasn't. The galley had become a little courtroom where the prosecution was also the crime. Victoria blocked the exit with her body. Breath sweet with expensive grapes and something sour underneath. "You think you're special," she said low. "This uniform, this job, this performance, it's pretend. You're playing dress-up where you don't belong." I set the coffee pot down and faced her. "When you say you people and them, that language has been used to separate and shrink human beings for centuries. I'm a person doing my job with dignity. Your discomfort is not my problem, and it's not evidence. Calm can be an insult when someone expects you to fold." She didn't take it well. Her hand shot to my shoulder and yanked. The seam gave way with a sound I still hear when I try to sleep. Fabric screaming. My skin hit air, the cabin held its breath, and time did that trick where you can hear a fork in 1A touch porcelain. Robert's chair scraped. "That's assault on a flight attendant," he said. The captain's voice landed on the intercom like a gavel. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are initiating immediate landing procedures due to a security incident. Please be seated now." I looked at Victoria. "Say what you mean," I said quietly. "You mean a black attendant. Stop hiding behind code." That's when the twist hit like sudden turbulence. A man stood up from business class, tugged off a baseball cap and sunglasses, and started up the aisle with the kind of calm that frightens people who mistake volume for power. I knew that jawline, that walk. My stomach dropped, and something like relief rose to meet it. "That's my daughter," he said, and the air pressure in that cabin changed. Heads turned, names got connected. Charles Montgomery. Which made me yes, that Montgomery. If you think I planted it, no. He had promised to let me handle it, and for every second until skin and law got involved, he did. Then he did what fathers do when lines are crossed. He moved. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. You assaulted my daughter and interfered with crew duties on my aircraft, he said, turning to Patricia without looking away from Victoria. How many prior complaints? 12 in 6 months, sir, all targeting staff of color. A pattern. Robert stepped forward. I saw everything, I'll testify. In 3B, the phone lens didn't blink. The plane was already descending. Stick around, because what happened next will blow your mind. We rolled to the gate in Miami, and the door opened to a different kind of welcome. FBI airport police, purposeful bodies moving with practiced grace. Ms. Piton, you're under arrest for assault on a flight crew member and interfering with crew duties with potential hate crime enhancements, pending investigation. They read her rights while mascara carved dark rivers down a face that wasn't used to consequence. She looked at me and tried a small voice. You're ruining my life over a misunderstanding. Is that what you want to teach your daughter? To destroy people? I was soaked, shaken, furious, and clear. The lesson is that actions have consequences. You're not being destroyed, you're being held accountable. There's a difference. If it were you, what would you have done? Accept an apology, push charges, try to forget it, and move on. Say it out loud. I gave my statement. I described the whine, the words, the rip. I described how humiliation can feel like being naked in a full room. My dad's lawyer arrived, heels silent, eyes not. We'll pursue federal and civil tracks, she said, not for spectacle, for precedent. The videos did what videos do, headlines did what headlines do, the internet tried to make my life a take. But the day that mattered more than the rip was 6 weeks later, in a courtroom where the air tasted like old paper, when a judge said, guilty probation fines, ban from commercial aircraft, mandatory training, community service with organizations she used to romanticize from a gala stage. Some people were angry, it wasn't prison. Some were grateful, it was something. Some wanted more, some wanted mercy. Here's the messy truth. Do we want punishment or change, and can we build both without breaking us in the process? Do you think accountability without cages is enough or not even close? I didn't want to spend the rest of my life flinching at every woman in 2A. I wanted to build something that outlived a news cycle. So we started the Amara Montgomery Foundation, named for my mother's steady hands. Scholarships for aspiring attendants from communities the industry liked to borrow smiles from, but not promote. Legal support for crew facing harassment and discrimination. Policy work to make airlines do more than issue a press release and wait out the storm. At our first event, I wore the uniform again. Same style, same color, same shoulders, but mended. If you didn't know where to look, you'd miss the seam. I didn't miss it. I touched that place with my 2 fingers and said, repairs don't make a thing weaker, they prove it was worth fixing. The room stood, some clapped polite, some clapped like they owed an apology to the whole sky. On the company side, my father pushed through policies that belonged to the future. Zero tolerance with actual teeth, no-fly lists for abusers, rapid escalation protocols that protect crew without forcing them to be heroes. Customer surveys shifted. Crew retention rose. Revenue grew where trust had been low. If respect came wrapped in numbers for some people, fine, we tied the bow tight. Not everything was tidy. I got a message from a new attendant named Destiny. First week on the line, a passenger told her with a smile that the back felt more appropriate. She looked him in the eye and said the front is appropriate for anyone who paid for it. She finished service without shaking, then sat on a crew room bench and cried. She wrote, I remembered your story, and I stood tall. Sometimes change is one person choosing not to shrink. Sometimes that's all a movement is. Months later, at an industry summit, I stood under 2 bright lights and ran my thumb along the mended seam while cameras blinked. You can barely see where it tore, I said, but I know it's there. The repair makes it stronger, not weaker. That's what turning pain into purpose looks like. That's what resilience means when the room doesn't want you in it. Some execs stared at their phones, which is also a choice. Others stood and clapped in that way that means, okay, let's do something. Another twist. Jessica Victoria's daughter reached out. She apologized for the dinner table lessons she was fed, and then repeated. She told me she'd gone into civil rights law. She asked if she could help. My yes felt complicated in my throat, but I said it anyway. We built a program to help kids from privileged backgrounds unlearn the polite sentences that turn into violence when no one important is watching. The first session was awkward and honest. A boy in a blazer stood up and said, "I thought certain seats were for certain people, and I didn't know I believed that until now." Progress rarely looks like a photo op, it looks like that. People ask if my dad broke his promise by stepping in. Did he steal my moment? Did he save me? Was it both? The answer is a not. He kept his distance until my body, my job, and the law were on the line. Then he used his power like a shield, not a spotlight. He taught me something I carry into every room with a long table. The question isn't whether to stand back or charge in, it's who the action protects. If it protects the vulnerable, move. If it protects your ego, sit down. 5 years later, we announced the Montgomery Protocols adopted by airlines across continents, not perfect, but a start with teeth. Executives who ignored documented discrimination would face personal consequences. Boards couldn't hide behind bland statements. Some partners signed gladly, some stalled. We ended code shares with the stallers. Plenty of seats in the sky, not all of them worth selling. I still fly sometimes. I still answer call lights and tuck blankets and ask the kind of questions that open people like windows. On good days, I feel my mother pacing the aisle beside me, the swish of her skirt, a lullaby only I can hear. On bad days, I sit in a lav breathe and the faucet hiss and say grace under pressure to the mirror until my hands stop buzzing. I haven't seen Victoria in person since the day the fabric screamed, but I saw her once on a monitor from a place where doors lock from the outside. She said she wasn't asking forgiveness, that she did it to herself. Maybe that's accountability, maybe that's convenience, maybe it's both. Here's where I leave you with something to argue about. What do we owe the people who harm us if they finally say the quiet part out loud? A path back, a wall, a window with conditions. Where do you land? If you're still here, you know this wasn't only about one woman in 2A. It's about who gets to belong and who decides about how often apologies sound like I didn't know who she was, which is not an apology, it's a confession. It's about whether companies use power to hide stains or to clean house. It's about a uniform that tore and a girl who didn't. So tell me in the comments, if it were you, would you have spoken up at the first ugly comment or waited until it turned physical? Where is your line and what will you do when someone crosses it in front of you? Share a time you stood up or a time you wish you had. Push back on me if you think we went too hard or not nearly hard enough. And if this story put a hand on your shoulder, hit subscribe, share it with one person who needs to hear that belonging isn't a favor handed down from the powerful. We decide together, we make the sky fair together. They can tear fabric, they can't tear spirit. Stand tall, stand kind, stand ready. And if you ever hear fabric scream, be the voice that's louder.